morning. My name is Isisi Allthings, and I am a Reiki healer, singer-songwriter, and an author. I live in Norwich in England, and today I've decided to narrate a short story for you from someone that's very relevant to our times, Julian of Norwich, although she lived 700 years ago in medieval England. So as you all settle in for your short story today, I'll tell you a little bit about me and why I've written this story. So Julian of Norwich, she was an anchoress and an author of divine revelations of love, and I will explain what an anchoress is in due course. It's February 2022, and since the spring of 2020, we've been in the clutches, as we know, of a worldwide virus, and we've all been in various lockdowns, not only here in the UK, but obviously for all of you in the rest of the world, all different times. But we've not known something collectively like this, really, in England since the First World War with the Spanish flu. In these unwilling times of self-isolation and quarantine during these 2 years, I'd like to begin by telling you a story that I feel is relevant for us in this time, because it may give us pause for thought about how to deal with self-isolation and quarantines. And this is from someone who became an expert at it for 40 years. So the tale begins with Julian of Norwich narrating about her wonderfully strange everyday existence. She was a very special lady who lived in Norwich, England in medieval times, who was born in 1343. We know practically nothing of her early background, but a great deal about her experiences. When Lady Julian was around 32 years of age, she became a Catholic anchorite. Well, I wasn't aware of what an anchorite was until I lived right near to her shrine, and I went to visit it one day. Julian was known as a spiritual authority in her community, where she also served as a kind of counsellor and advisor. Next to her shrine, I found a library, and it's attached to St. Julian's Church. In there, you can find a library of old and new books, and you can sit and have a browse before you decide if you want to buy anything. And many of these, there are many various translations of the book that Julian of Norwich wrote herself, and it's called Divine Revelations of Love, and which you'll find out why in the story. So she completed this book about 1410, and her death was around 1416. And some of the original copies of her writings are actually kept in the British Library. So Julian was from an educated background. She was able to read and write, and she even knew Hebrew. And in her book, she describes how she gravely fell ill at the age of 30, possibly from the bubonic plague. It's a far more ravaging disease than the plague today. Well, the virus. And this has already swept Norwich for 2 years, but back then in 1349, the first time was when Julian was around 7 years old. She was lucky at the time not to contract it, but the plague returned, as they do, and she was an adult. Julian's condition deteriorated very quickly at home, and upon her deathbed, she was gazing upon the Jesus on the cross in her delirious state. And she had 16 shewings or visions where the Lord Jesus actually spoke with her, and she observed the passions of the Christ on the cross. Well, luckily, Mother Julian survived, and this near-death experience changed her completely. She dedicated herself to full-time service, renounced her worldly goods, with this as obtaining the full blessing of the bishop to be interred in a cell on the side of the church. And it's possible she was a mother, or she could have been a nun, but we don't have that information. No one in her family seems to have survived what was probably the plague. As was typical of an anchor or an anchorite, there was a ceremony to signify their willing internment, and then the door was sealed behind them by the bishop, and a vow was taken to remain in this room for the rest of their life. Shocking as it may seem that she willingly chose this self-isolation, it sounds horrifying, but there's many benefits to this life in medieval times, as we will see. I'll now narrate her story as if I were Julian herself, beginning with her morning rituals, as we take a peek into how her day may have begun. So this is part 1 of my 9-part series on YouTube, and it's called Morning Rituals. Dear children of God, my eyes flutter open with the first rays of the dawn piercing through a little tiny window like a golden sword. This window faces to the east and is my small opening to the beloved ones living outside of this church of St. Julian in Norwich. It is the 14th century. As I lie on my unforgiving horsehair mattress in contemplation, I stretch to make myself more comfortable, and I bring my hands together over my heart in readiness for my first morning prayers of thanks. And that is to the Lord God, the source of all that is. My hands are icy cold on my rosary. I live in a stone room, and it's attached to this Catholic place of worship where there are few luxuries in these medieval times. My assistant will light a fire in the hearth once I am arisen. Having recited the Lord's Prayer, now I consider the many things that I have to be grateful for in these perilous times. The Black Death has swept through Norwich for 2 whole years in 1349, and at the time I was 6 years old, but I survived. I myself nearly died of the plague when I was 30, and this I consider a miracle that I survived, and many blessings have sprung from that. So when I was 39, during the times of the 100 Years' War with France, I also heard many accounts of the peasants' revolt from those who came to my window for words of comfort. Those were great times of injustice, fear, anxiety, and lack of security for many. Well, this is similar to that which you, dear ones, are experiencing today with the virus. Self-isolation, worries about finance, loss of those loved ones. In return for my counsel, I would be given small portions of food or water, whatever could be spared by the folk. If it were not for this kindness and my dowry, I would not be alive at 58 and writing the longer version of my book, Divine Revelations of Love. It is about my shewings, the visions I had of Christ's passion during my near-death experience nearly 26 years ago. I'm grateful to be alive and in good health when all around me outside is disease, filth, stench from the streets. I reach for my pomander of sweet herbs, taking a deep breath to clear my head and uplift my spirits. It contains lavender, which I find so calming. As I lie in this reverie, I feel a slight pull on my linen gown. I look down. A sudden pounce brings my dear feline companion to light on my lap. This delightful cat is named Amelia, which means work, and she is my protector. Hello, Amelia. If it were not for her, my holy cell would no doubt be overrun by mice and rats, even looking for spare crumbs of the dry bread that I may drop. I stroke her soft fur. I'm thankful for her purring warmth, kneading comfort into my soul. I hear a rustling someone's coming to my second little opening to my room. It's my church assistant bringing me a bowl of cold water for my toilet, and the second assistant to light the fire. Thank you. Amelia plops off my bed as I throw back the roughly woven woolen blankets and cotton covers. I fetch my own covered bowl of excrements to hand to the attendant in return. This provision is given in grace of my promise to Christ that I will remain sealed in this chamber in his service to the end of my days, and I'm called an anchorite for this reason. I'm also referred to as a mystic due to the nature of my previous visions, which are a direct communication from God in the eyes of the church. Actually, they hadn't had a mystic give visions of the Christ for a few hundred years, so I suppose I became a bit of a well-known person for that. Once my physical routine is attended to, I'm fresh to start the new day of contemplation and devotion. I'm in a world betwixt and between. I'm fully in the present moment between life and death each day. Although I was blessed into this position by the bishop, I needed my family fortune to bequeath to the church, which is left to me, and it's all that I had when they passed away with the plague. This now acts as a pledge for my keep, that I may not be a burden on the church or the people for the rest of my time here, which turned out to be 40 years. So this small private space that only I inhabit is similar to that of a hermit, and is just as many of you now experiencing when you're alone in your home due to the government restrictions to stem the flow of the virus. This may be the first and last time you'll ever experience such self-isolation that I lived with for so many years till my death. It's all the more difficult for you though, dear ones, as it was not something that you chose, as I did. But it's now an opportunity for you to turn inwards, surrender, and there is a space that you may find. It's called liminality. This is where you can experience a spiritual awakening, if approached in the right manner. You can choose to complain about your lot, unable to visit your friends or enjoy a meal in a restaurant, or you can use this time wisely for your personal growth. It's a marginal existence that I live, which is neither in the past nor in the future, but is a state of pure potential each day. You'll understand it now in terms of a personal transition, a transcendence, or a transformation, although I simply understand it as a state of grace. I'm curiously outside of everyday experience, but strangely still a part of it too, as you are with your technology and social media. It can be a blessed time without the normal concerns that people would speak to me of. I'm protected from vile diseases and without worries of finding a roof over my head or clothing and sustenance. I surrender, though, the experience of joining with another in physical love and begetting children. But in place of this, I have become as without sexual gender, respected by men of the cloth just as much as women, as a mystic with a direct connection, a divine spiritual experience for which I am honoured. I have the advantage of coming from a family who had the funds to teach me how to read and write, even in Hebrew, which I now put to higher use in my copying of sacred text onto parchment for the church, and speaking of the wisdom gained through my insights. There are those that clamour at my window in times of duress. I'm able to give them some of these insights, and you would possibly call me today a mentor or a coach, perhaps. Yes, I do weave, sew and embroider as a woman would in these days, but my offerings are for the altars and kneeling hassocks here, and I sew and repair clothes for the poor as well. In your terms today, you may describe me as asexual, with the meaning of becoming neither a man nor a woman in a spiritual sense. It's a form of emancipation from the traditional roles of male and female, becoming, as the angels described in the Bible, as non-sexual beings. Saint Jerome of the 1st century spoke of this, and I quote him: "While a woman serves for birth and children, she is different from man as body is from soul. But when she wants to serve Christ more than the world, then she shall cease to be called a woman and shall be called a man." So that is the conclusion of my first day in this 9-part series, A Day in the Life of Julian. Please join me as I take you through how I coped and how I kept my sanity in this small room for many years in part 2, The Power of Gratitude. This is a part of Global Unity Festival today, and that will be on the first Sunday of the month. So in March, I will be narrating part 2. But if you can't wait to find out the rest of the story, you can also have a look on my YouTube channel, where I have all the pre-recorded sessions there, and that's called Peaceful Minds and Souls. Thank you for your kind attention. I bid you a good day, be healthy, and keep safe, my beloveds.